In this episode, we begin security operations by looking at mitigating controls, which are the practical safeguards used to reduce risk after a threat, weakness, or exposure has been identified. Mitigation does not always mean removing the risk completely. Sometimes it means reducing the chance that something bad will happen. Sometimes it means limiting the damage if it does happen. Sometimes it means buying time until a stronger fix can be applied. You will see this idea often in real security work because organizations rarely operate in perfect conditions. A system may need to stay online while a patch is tested. A vulnerable application may need protection while developers work on a permanent fix. A sensitive network may need tighter separation because some devices cannot be upgraded quickly. Mitigating controls give security teams practical ways to lower risk without pretending every problem can be solved instantly. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at Cyber.Me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A mitigation is different from simply noticing that a risk exists. Finding a vulnerability, seeing suspicious activity, or identifying weak access rules is only the beginning. The organization still has to do something that changes the risk picture. That action might be technical, such as applying a patch, blocking a connection, or isolating a device. It might be procedural, such as requiring approval before access is granted. It might be administrative, such as changing a policy or assigning responsibility. The purpose is to make the environment safer in a measurable way. If a server has an unnecessary service exposed, mitigation might mean disabling that service. If users have more access than they need, mitigation might mean reducing permissions. If a risky file needs to be examined, mitigation might mean opening it in a controlled sandbox instead of on a normal workstation. Segmentation is one of the most important mitigating controls because it limits how freely traffic, users, systems, or attackers can move. Without segmentation, a network can become too flat, meaning many systems can reach many other systems with little restriction. That may be convenient, but it can also be dangerous. If an attacker compromises one workstation, they may be able to scan, connect, and move toward more valuable systems. Segmentation creates boundaries so different parts of the environment are separated based on function, sensitivity, trust level, or business need. A payment processing environment may be separated from general office systems. Administrative systems may be separated from normal user systems. Development and production environments may be separated so testing activity does not affect live services. Segmentation does not guarantee safety, but it reduces the chance that one compromise becomes an organization-wide incident. Segmentation can be physical, logical, or both. Physical segmentation may use separate hardware, separate networks, or separate locations. Logical segmentation may use virtual local area networks, VLANs, firewall rules, cloud network policies, identity-based access, or software-defined controls to separate traffic even when systems share underlying infrastructure. For Security Plus, you do not need to configure these technologies in detail. You need to understand the security purpose. Segmentation reduces exposure by making communication more intentional. Instead of allowing every system to talk to every other system, the organization defines which communication is needed and blocks the rest. This supports least privilege at the network level. It also helps incident response because a suspicious system can be contained more easily when boundaries already exist. Good segmentation gives defenders room to slow, detect, and stop an attack before it spreads too far. Access control is another core mitigation because it determines who or what is allowed to use a resource. Access control applies to people, applications, devices, services, data, networks, and administrative functions. If a sensitive database is accessible to everyone in the company, the risk is much higher than if access is limited to approved roles with a valid business need. Strong access control starts with identity, but it does not stop there. The system must also decide what the identity is allowed to do. A user may be allowed to view records, but not change them. An administrator may manage one system, but not another. A service account may read one dataset, but not export everything. Access control reduces risk by narrowing the set of actions that can happen. When compromise occurs, limited access can also limit the damage. Least privilege is the guiding idea behind good access control. It means giving users, systems, and processes only the access they need to perform their legitimate tasks, and no more. This sounds obvious, but overpermissioning is common because broad access is convenient. A new employee may receive access copied from another employee who had too many permissions. A temporary project account may keep access long after the project ends. An administrator may use a powerful account for daily work instead of reserving it for administrative tasks. These habits create risk. If a low-level account is compromised but has broad access, the attacker receives broad access too. Mitigation may involve access reviews, role cleanup, privilege removal, stronger approval processes, and multi-factor authentication, MFA, for sensitive actions. The goal is to make access deliberate, limited, monitored, and easier to justify. Hardening means reducing the attack surface of a system by making it more secure than its default or unmanaged state. The attack surface includes the services, ports, features, accounts, applications, permissions, and interfaces that could be misused or attacked. Many systems are designed to be flexible, which means they may include features that an organization does not actually need. Hardening removes or restricts what is unnecessary. That can include disabling unused services, removing default accounts, changing insecure default settings, limiting administrative access, applying secure configuration baselines, enabling logging, and requiring stronger authentication. Hardening matters because attackers often look for easy opportunities. A system with unnecessary services, weak defaults, old accounts, and loose permissions gives them more options. A hardened system gives them fewer paths to try. It does not make the system impossible to attack, but it raises the difficulty and reduces avoidable exposure. Patching is closely related to hardening because it fixes known weaknesses in software, firmware, operating systems, and applications. A patch may correct a security vulnerability, improve stability, or address a reliability problem. When a known vulnerability is publicly disclosed, attackers may try to find systems that have not been patched yet. That creates a race between defenders applying fixes and attackers exploiting the weakness. Patching sounds simple, but organizations have to test changes, avoid breaking critical services, schedule maintenance windows, track versions, and confirm that updates were actually applied. Sometimes a patch cannot be applied immediately because of compatibility, operational, or vendor issues. In those cases, mitigation may include temporary controls such as segmentation, access restrictions, disabling a vulnerable feature, increased monitoring, or a web application firewall. The permanent fix may still be the patch, but temporary mitigation reduces risk while the organization gets there. Isolation is the practice of separating a system, process, user session, or workload so problems are contained. Isolation can be used when something is suspicious, when something is risky by nature, or when sensitive workloads should not interact with less trusted environments. A compromised laptop may be isolated from the network, so it cannot communicate with other systems while responders investigate. A high-risk application may run in a restricted environment, so it cannot freely access the rest of the device. A sensitive administrative session may be separated from normal browsing and email use. Isolation is powerful because it limits contact. Many attacks depend on moving from one place to another, reaching new resources, or interacting with other systems. If the risky item is contained, the attacker has fewer opportunities. Isolation can be temporary during incident response or permanent as part of secure architecture. Sandboxing is a specific form of isolation used to run or examine something in a controlled environment. A sandbox may be used to open a suspicious file, test software behavior, analyze a link, execute code, or observe an application without giving it full access to the normal system. The idea is that the sandbox limits what the item can affect. If the file is malicious, the damage should be contained within the sandbox instead of spreading to a user's real workstation or production environment. Sandboxing is common in malware analysis, browser protection, email security, application testing, and endpoint security tools. You can think of it as giving risky activity a safe play area with walls around it. Those walls are not perfect, and advanced malware may try to detect or escape sandbox environments. But sandboxing still reduces risk by preventing direct exposure to important systems. Mitigating controls often work best when they are layered. A single control may reduce one kind of risk, but layered controls reduce risk in several ways at once. Imagine a vulnerable internal application that cannot be patched until the vendor releases a compatible update. The organization may segment the application from the rest of the network, restrict access to only approved users, monitor traffic closely, harden the underlying server, disable unnecessary features, and test suspicious uploads in a sandbox. None of those controls is the same as permanently fixing the vulnerability, but together they lower the chance of exploitation and reduce the likely impact. Layering also helps when one control fails. If access control is misconfigured, segmentation may still limit reach. If a malicious file reaches a user, sandboxing may reduce execution risk. Good mitigation rarely depends on one fragile barrier. There is also a difference between compensating controls and corrective fixes. A corrective fix directly addresses the underlying weakness. Applying a patch to remove a vulnerability is a corrective fix. Removing an unnecessary service is a corrective fix if that service created the exposure. A compensating control reduces risk when the preferred fix is not possible, not practical, or not yet available. For example, if a legacy system cannot support modern authentication, the organization may place it behind stronger network restrictions, limit who can reach it, monitor it more closely, and require additional controls around the accounts that use it. Those compensating controls do not magically make the legacy system modern. They reduce risk around the weakness. This distinction matters because exam questions may ask what to do when a direct fix cannot be applied immediately. The answer is often a mitigating or compensating control that lowers exposure. Mitigating controls should also be monitored and reviewed. A control that worked last year may not still be effective today. Network segments may accumulate exceptions. Access lists may grow as people change jobs. Hardened systems may drift from their baseline as emergency changes are made. Sandboxes may need updates to detect newer behavior. Patches may fail on some machines, even though the deployment report looks successful. Security operations is about maintaining controls over time, not just creating them once. This is where logging, alerting, configuration management, vulnerability scanning, access review, and change control become important. A mitigation should have an owner, a purpose, and a way to verify it still works. Otherwise, the organization may believe risk has been reduced when the control has quietly weakened or disappeared. For Security Plus questions, focus on what risk the scenario is trying to reduce. If the problem is that systems can reach too many other systems, segmentation is likely involved. If the problem is too many people or accounts can use a resource, think access control and least privilege. If the problem is insecure default settings, unnecessary services, or broad attack surface, think hardening. If the problem is a known software weakness, patching may be the direct fix, while other controls may be temporary mitigation. If the problem is a suspicious or compromised system that should not communicate freely, think isolation. If the problem is safely examining risky code, files, or behavior, think sandboxing. The answer is rarely about choosing the control that sounds most advanced. It is about matching the control to the specific risk and the practical constraint described. The larger lesson is that mitigation is the working side of security. It turns awareness into action. Segmentation limits movement. Access control limits who or what can use resources. Hardening reduces unnecessary exposure. Patching removes known weaknesses when updates are available and safe to apply. Isolation contains risky systems, sessions, or workloads. Sandboxing creates a controlled place to examine or run suspicious activity. These controls do not all solve the same problem, and they do not eliminate every risk by themselves. They help the organization reduce likelihood, reduce impact, or buy time until a stronger fix is possible. When you understand mitigating controls this way, the topic becomes practical instead of abstract. You are learning how security teams make real environments safer one decision at a time, even when systems are imperfect and risks cannot all be removed at once.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.